Good morning, everybody. My name is Travis Rash. I am the Housing Programs Manager, the number 2 for East Missouri Action Agency and the St. Francis County Public Housing Agency, and I am thrilled to be here to present this information to you today. So, should my community, my agency, our local public housing agency be involved in project-based vouchers? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. I professionally and personally believe that. Eileen told me it was not okay for me just to say no and then walk off the stage. So, I have to lead with a disclaimer for myself because I have a little bit longer time left in the affordable housing arena, I hope, than Wayne does. I have to say up front that none of my personal or professional opinions necessarily reflect those of MHDC and HUD. So we're going to talk today a little bit about the professional background and what the St. Francis County Public Housing Agency actually does, programs and funding sources. We're going to talk about how your agencies can partner with your local PHAs, how you can form housing resource continuums to ensure that the affordable housing needs in your communities are being met. We're going to talk about the Project-Based Voucher program explicitly because this program is an exceptional tool in the affordable housing tool belt. We're going to talk about why. And then we're going to talk about some of the benefits of that program across the board, both for the PHAs themselves, the community, and the housing project. And then we're going to talk about how to get started. So that's me. This is my professional background, formerly Housing Development Officer with the Missouri Housing Development Commission. I was the housing department head at the Whole Person Center for Independent Living. I am a zealous advocate for affordable and accessible housing. I love the questions today that have been asked about how do we create more accessible, affordable housing. Right now, I do some development consulting on the side for various parties to really bring together everything to make healthy housing development projects, including those wraparound services that we talked about. How do we integrate those into our projects? How do we integrate different levels of subsidy to ensure that the project itself is feasible? My wife mocks me relentlessly for this photo, too, by the way. She says, the 1990s boy bands called, they want their hair back. I love the frosted tips. Next slide. We are a public housing agency. That's what the St. Francis County Public Housing Agency does. What exactly does this mean? As soon as I figure it out, I will let you know. Really, we are HUD's arm, HUD's subsidiary for addressing the affordable housing need in our geographic catchment area. We serve St. Francis County on the northernmost part of our catchment area, all the way down to the Boot Heel. So about an hour south of St. Louis, all the way down to the state of Tennessee. We have the largest geographic catchment area of any public housing agency in the state. It's pretty interesting. It is the same amount of time for me to get from my office in the northernmost part of my catchment area down to my southern office as it is for me to get across the state from my office to Springfield. It's about 3 hours from north to south, the area that we serve, 11 counties. Next slide. These are some of the programs that we operate. I'll start by giving a broad brush over our tenant-based rental assistance programs, and then we'll move into the project-based side and talk about those in a little bit more detail. The largest program that we allocate is the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Just the basics, we allocate about 1,600 to 1,700 of these vouchers that we have leased up every year, somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 people across our 11 counties. So it's a great program, the largest federal program available for especially those individuals that are low or extremely low income to address their housing needs. Mainstream, this is a great program. We used this a lot when I was at the Whole Person in Kansas City. We still use it today with the St. Francis County Housing Authority, the St. Francis County PHA. For Mainstream, this is a program that's set aside for individuals that are under the age of 62 where the head of household has a disability, and prioritized for individuals that may be experiencing houselessness or imminent risk of houselessness. We were able to set up a partnership between the Whole Person and the Housing Authority of Kansas City to allocate those vouchers as quickly as possible to address those affordable housing needs for that population. Does anybody want to wager a guess as to what they think the average wait time between pre-application and lease-up for a voucher is in Kansas City? 6 months. It's pretty close, pretty close. It's usually on average about 5 to 7 years. Unreal. Does anybody want to take a guess as to what our average wait time was for the whole person on that program? Our average wait time was 90 days. Does anybody want to wager a guess as to the fastest that we were able to allocate a voucher from pre-app to lease-up on this program at the whole person?
34 days.
Pretty close. 24 hours.
Oh, shit.
I never want to do that much paperwork in that little amount of time again. It was something. But just as Mr. Jensen said, I don't like the word impossible when it comes to housing. We can do it. We got all of those systems aligned. We're reading from the same sheet of music, and we got it done. Very, very cool program. Shelter Plus, we use this. This is a partnership with DMH, the Department of Mental Health, in our continuum of care to ensure that our friends and neighbors that may be experiencing mental health needs, that their housing is addressed and that they're receiving supportive wraparound mental health services at the same time. Family self-sufficiency, honestly, one of my favorite programs that we allocate. Under this program, if I come onto the housing choice voucher, let's say I get a little bit better job and I start earning additional income, that income that I'm earning will then go for me into an escrow. The money that we would normally pay out for housing assistance payments goes into an escrow, into a bank account that tenant can hold on to over their participation in the program. When they graduate off of the program, they can then use that escrow however they like. Maybe they want to start a business, buy a home, what have you. One of my favorite stories from the program that we manage, we had a young lady that was living in a trailer using our housing assistance payments through the Housing Choice Voucher Program to pay for her rent in that trailer. Whenever she graduated off of that program, she used that escrow as a down payment on her trailer park. She bought the whole thing.
Wow.
That level of self-sufficiency, economic improvement, empowerment, that's what we're all about. Next slide, please. Fostering Youth to Independence. This is a program that we have set aside for our tenants that may be between the ages of 18 to 24. They're coming out of the foster program. They may need assistance getting set up in life, getting started on that journey through adulthood. This helps us address that need. Tenant protection vouchers, Deke mentioned during his presentation, sometimes these housing units, public housing units shut down. How do we address the needs of the tenants that are inside of that building? This is one of the tools that we use. We supply the tenant protection voucher to the tenants that are in that building shutting down so they can find housing on the private market to address that need. Emergency housing voucher, this was a program that was conceptualized out of the COVID context. Not presently expanding at the moment, maybe there's an opportunity for that in the future, who knows, but essentially these vouchers are set aside to address the housing needs of individuals that are experiencing category 1 or 4 of houselessness. And what that means is they are on the street, in a car, in a barn, in a space that's not made for human habitation, where they're fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. We can use these vouchers to kind of address that need and make sure we can get that taken care of quickly. There's some additional funding, $3,500 worth per tenant family of a service fee that we can use to address any barriers that they may be experiencing to their housing. We can sponge arrearage, we can pay for application fees, we can do all sorts of creative things with that money. Stability is kind of like EHV's younger brother. It's conceptualized shortly after. Kind of requires the same referral from the continuum of care that we partner with here. This one expands our definition of houseless category 1, category 2, and category 4. Category 2 of houselessness are folks that are facing an imminent risk of houselessness. They've received that letter that says you're going to be evicted in 30 days, you got to get out. Maybe we can intercede and step in and get them rehoused. VASH, a fantastic program, Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing. This program is geared for our houseless veterans, making sure they get the assistance and the care that they need. Our referrals on that program are actually slowing down. That sounds like a bad thing, but that's actually because due to programs like this and other programs that HUD is currently implementing, veteran houselessness has gone down over the last decade by 50%. That's awesome. We are thrilled about it. Portability is not an independent program, but a feature of the Housing Choice Voucher program itself. Portability essentially means that someone with a Housing Choice Voucher is able to move to a different housing authority if they choose to do so. Maybe they want to move for additional economic opportunity, you name it, they have the right to do that. Home ownership, we have a home ownership program where we can actually use HAP instead of that housing assistance payment going to a landlord or a private provider. That goes towards one of our tenants' mortgage. They have the right to buy a home for themselves utilizing that program. There are a few stipulations to get onto that program, but it's a wonderful program for helping our tenants break that generational cycle of poverty, achieve home ownership, keep that asset for themselves.
Fantastic.
These are more of our project-based programs, meaning the assistance from these programs are attached to the buildings themselves, not necessarily to the tenant families. Project-based vouchers, we're going to go into a ton of detail on those today, so I'll jump right over that. Section 202, this is a HUD program that's set aside traditionally now for individuals that are above the age of 62. So for individuals above the age of 62, this assistance is attached to their units. They can reside in those units and not pay any more than 30% of their adjusted monthly income for their housing. Section 811 is a pretty interesting boutique program. That program is set aside for individuals who are disabled, individuals that identify as having a disability. And it's kind of interesting, Section 202 kind of used to combine those populations that used to be set aside for individuals above the age of 62 and individuals with disabilities. There's a lot of separation now these days because what we realized over time is that 25-year-olds with a disability, they still maybe 25-year-olds. They like 25-year-old things. They like music, they like friends and crowds. Doesn't blend well with a senior unit, does it? Not always the best. Now that those two programs are separated, it just works a little bit better to address the need in a more eclectic way. And then USDA RD, we manage a USDA RD property. This is one of the largest spaces. Wherever HUD may not be able to fill in the gap in those rural spaces, affordable housing is then picked up by the USDA Rural Development Department. And there are 250,000 multifamily units that are under this program presently. And that's something we're keeping an eye on as well, as those contracts are set to expire for a lot of different units. So we don't have a public housing agency. We're not a public housing agency. We're a nonprofit, or this doesn't really relate to us at all. Does this still apply? Yes, I firmly believe that it does. The questions that need to be asked if this is the case is, who is the PHA in my catchment area? Who is the public housing agency? Are they doing this? Yes or no? If they're not doing this, can we convince them to start? Can we convince them to utilize this program in new and creative ways to really support affordable housing development? We've been going around the state to encourage, especially rural PHAs are not necessarily using this program to its full capacity. We're trying to inspire that to have it done more effectively. Second question, what kind of partnerships can we form? And can we form those partnerships, referral arteries to the public housing agencies to ensure that our most vulnerable populations are being served effectively? So project-based vouchers, what are these? What do they do? Project-based vouchers are vouchers that are administered by a public housing agency that already administers a tenant-based voucher assistance program. The assistance is applied through a housing assistance payment contract, and that contract applies to the entire building. Whereas on the tenant-based side, we have one contract per door, one contract per unit. This contract applies to the entire building, so it works a little bit differently. They're awarded through a selection process. The competition for those awards are governed by the public housing agency that is making that award.
Travis, this work us down. We have a new battery.
All right. So I want to point out that there are no additional funds provided except under special allocations. I do have to say that might be shifting a little bit from what I hear. There could be some opportunities in the future, but I won't go into detail on that. The assistance is tied to the unit. That is a little bit more difficult for even some of our public housing staff to kind of conceptualize the difference between the tenant-based assistance and the project-based assistance. But it's important to understand most of everything regarding project-based vouchers involves the unit, not necessarily the tenant family that lives there. So HUD limits the number of units that can be in the project-based voucher program per PHA to 20% of the total allocation of units that we have. So for my particular PHA, we have about 2,400 units under our ACC, our annual contributions contract. We can have up to 480 of those be project-based. HUD limits the number of project-based vouchers units that can be utilized in a single building to 25% of the units or 25, whichever is greater. So if you have a 200-unit apartment building for any particular reason and you want a project-based 50 of them, you definitely can. There are a couple of exceptions to number 4 up here. Those would include senior units. For the folks that are above the age of 62, you can project-base that whole unit. For units that are set aside to serve individuals with special needs, disabilities, various identified populations. So why? Why should we do this? Why should we be involved in this? The benefits of project-based vouchers. We're going to talk about the utility, longevity, sustainability, and efficiency. So the utility of project-based vouchers, what do I mean by this? These are a remarkably effective tool at answering the affordable housing question. Here we just heard from Wayne, we have these LIHTC units and they're meeting their cap, they're getting ready to expire. What happens to them? Are they going to go back private market? Is that rent going to triple? It very well could. We have actually been successful at utilizing project-based vouchers to sustain that affordable housing. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But this project, this program that we're utilizing, this program improves for us as a public housing agency our leasing rates. We don't have any more floating vouchers. That was a significant problem. As Dick mentioned before, we're having this issue with landlords actually accepting our tenant-based vouchers. Oh, we don't want to do that for whatever reason. It's a problem, and those vouchers expire. For us, of every 10 vouchers that we issue on the tenant-based side, only 4 of them will lease up. We have a 40% success rate. Under the Project-Based Voucher Assistance Program, we have a 98% success rate. This raises our total leasing rate by 8 to 9% across the programs from north to south. It's fantastic. We have better housing assistance payment utilization, better admin returns for us. They also greatly enhance project developability and performance. I absolutely love these as a tool for housing development, and I would argue that NHDC most likely does as well. So here's an example of that. This is the utility of project-based vouchers in action. This was one of a project that East Missouri Action Agency and RCH Development, Mr. Hartle, who's in the back, shout out to him. This was a great partnership that we put together to develop these affordable housing units and keep them in our community. These units here, 16 of the 40 units have project-based voucher assistance attached to them. So that's remarkable for the folks that are going to get the opportunity to live here, ensuring that they're going to pay 30% of their adjusted monthly income for their rent. Down here at the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you can see there's also going to be a Head Start on site, a Head Start campus for those families and children. And there's going to be a community services outreach space as well. That's kind of how we address the services question in this particular development. We put the services directly on site to ensure permanent, stable, supported housing outcomes for the families that live here. It's an exceptional project. This project had a twin. We had another project that essentially had the same layout, was very close to the same project that was submitted at the same time. That project did not get awarded. This project did. The only difference between these two projects was that this one had project-based voucher assistance attached. That's why I think it's really important to bridge that gap. Project-based vouchers have this ability to kind of concatenate, merge, bridge the space between affordability in a project, ensuring that it's affordable for our tenants, and feasibility, ensuring that the numbers work and that the project pencils, ensuring that it can actually be developed and awarded. Longevity of project-based vouchers. The initial HAP contract for these vouchers can have a term of 1 to 20 years depending on the needs of all parties at the table. Our projects, almost all except one, had an initial term of 20 years. The contract can receive an extension of up to an additional 20 years. You put those back to back, that's 40 years. One contract can provide affordable housing for 40 years. That is fantastic. If you think about that, we're going to talk a little bit more about the implications of that, but for me, I know 40 years from now, when some of these projects may end, I think it's going to be someone else's problem because I'm a year retired.
Yeah, basically.
So, sustainability is just pivotal. That's what we're here to talk about a lot today as we lose these LIHTC doors. How do we intercede? How do we get in front of that? What are some of the solutions we have to prevent the hemorrhaging of doors? Because it's disastrous for our families and our communities. Sustainability of project-based vouchers. Depending on your administrative plan language as a public housing agency, depending on your request for proposals, you can enhance scoring to preserve affordable housing. The more housing that gets preserved, the higher the points, the higher the chance that project is going to be awarded project-based vouchers. LIHTC projects meet their cap at 30 years. What then? 30 years go by, folks live there. What are they going to do if that goes to private market? This actually happened to us in St. Francis County. We identified several projects that were getting ready to expire. This is the role that the public housing agency can play in using this tool to intercede. We stepped in on at least some of these projects and were able to supply enough project-based voucher assistance to ensure that those units were protected for at least another 20 years. Our oldest tenant on our program lives in one of the buildings that we just project-based. She's 105 years old. Can you imagine what would happen if she had to relocate? Can you imagine what would happen if her rent tripled overnight? That's what we're here to do. This text was actually sent to me again by the gentleman in the back room, Mr. Hartwell. You'll hear from him a little later. Thanks, Travis. This saved 64 units of affordable housing just by project basing them. That's enough housing for 180 people. It's vital to use this in that way. I absolutely love using this as a tool to sustain affordable housing. Is it a permanent solution? Can it be supplied across the board? Maybe not, but it can at least make a dent, make a difference in preserving that affordable housing stock. Efficiency? No.
I'm controlling it again. It stopped working.
Okay.
Where do you want?
A little bit back.
Oh.
There we go. Efficiency of project-based vouchers. Definitely a plus for us as a public housing agency to keep our doors consolidated under one roof. Less travel time for our staff. As I mentioned before, our catchment area is 3 hours across. Can you imagine how much of an administrative burden it could be to send an inspector that far each and every time on each individual unit? It costs us a lot of money. So if we can consolidate those under one roof, that really helps us kind of save that efficiency. We have facilitated paperwork processes in the sense that we have assistance from the professional management of each one of these units to kind of help us acquire the paperwork that we need to recertify our individuals that are living in these buildings. And we have different inspection criteria that allow us to inspect all of those doors in one place at one time to kind of save us from having to go over the curvature of the earth from one house to the other to get those inspections done. I'm thrilled to say that we have at least two of our project-based voucher partners, our developer owners that put these applications together with us in the room today. Another one I have to give her a shout out, Ms. Giffen. She put up a few projects and we're really excited about. So it wouldn't be a thorough or fair analysis if I didn't at least mention the drawbacks of project-based vouchers, because nothing's perfect, right? There's a trade-off to every kind of assistance that we have. Some of the drawbacks here, number one, it can be an administrative burden to get set up. A lot of new regulations in place, different philosophies for project-based vouchers and tenant-based. There's a loss of perception of housing choice, and I use that word intentionally, perception, because I sometimes refer to the housing choice voucher as the lack of housing choice voucher, because our landlords are not taking them. They're not accepting them. Very few, very limited options. When I have that voucher, that tenant-based voucher, to go out there and use it, they may not have as much of an experience of housing choice, but at least they can help get that question answered. And these units are very, very nice to live in. So it's a loss of the perception of housing choice, but there's a unit out there, and we hope our tenants are more than satisfied with their experience in those units. So how did we get this started? This is an old cliche, journey of 1,000 miles, and yada, yada, yada. The first steps were to contact HUD. That's a great first step, especially as a public housing agency with everything. If HUD knows first, we're generally off on the right foot. Number two, we let our board know about project-based vouchers, what we were doing, intending to do. Administrative plans and annual and 5-year plans. Is anything about project-based vouchers in those sources? These are the documents that govern how a public housing agency operates its program. If that language is not in there, I recommend adding it. For your local public housing agency in whatever area you might come from to be here today, it's a good year to check in with your public housing agency to find out. Do they operate this program? Can they add this language? They may have public hearing opportunities to help govern the way that they operate their programs, and you as a community can play a role in guiding the future implementation of this and other programs. So how we continue to get started, we drafted our request for proposal. The language for the RFP, the request for proposal, came directly out of our administrative plan. If anybody would like a copy of ours, I'm more than happy to share. I put it up briefly on the screen. Then we scored the projects through a competitive process, and we drafted and executed our housing assistance payment contracts or our agreement to enter into a housing assistance payment for new construction buildings. This is the path to home for our existing units, how we implemented. We issued the RFP, did our site reviews, rate reasonableness, all that good stuff, and then we went on through the process and we started the subsidy on at least 6 of our projects currently. It was pretty interesting. Our HUD field rep was like, Travis, what did you guys do a little bit differently? Because normally when we have one of these processes, we might only have 1 or 2 projects respond total. For the St. Francis County PHA, due to our expression of intentionality to get the word out there, we had 9 for our first round. It's exceptional. This is the path to home that someone may follow to implement a project that's a new construction or a rehab unit. So if somebody wanted to pair this with like a project being submitted to MHDC to get a LIHTC award, this is how they could go about doing that. The 2 largest differences for this particular process over the existing doors are these 2 steps right down here in the middle of the screen: environmental review and clearance and subsidy layering reviews. They happen. Other than that, I can't tell you much about them. I'm not an expert on them, but they're fun processes to take part in. This will load.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Give me just a second. This is the request for proposals that we actually sent out on August 15th of 2023. This is like a slideshow and a slideshow. It's just kind of a marketing attempt for Canva, apparently. But this is the proposal that was sent out that we had our developer through partners respond to actually get these awarded to their developments. I'm sure that's enough of that.
Okay.
I mean, not one. Versus saying anything incriminating, so. So these are awarded through 2 different types of processes: competitive and non-competitive processes. Competitive processes mean like these are existing doors and they just want to capture these project-based voucher assistance in their units. They apply, we score them against each other, and it's competitive. You have to have, a better project in order to be awarded. The PHA can also select projects through a non-competitive process. So what that means is if your project was awarded under a different public RFP, request for proposal, over the last 3 years, then we could go ahead and jump straight to awarding that project with project-based vouchers. Prime example of this would be low-income housing tax credit units. If something was awarded LIHTC over the last 3 years, we can jump in and then project-based because we know that has been publicly approved already. So it's pretty interesting how this works out. This is the checklist that we use to actually make sure that we have all the documents necessary to kind of gauge, score, and award these projects. It's almost the exact same checklist as MHDC would require for a 4% or 9% LIHTC deal. Basically, if someone has a LIHTC app already put together, all those documents, you send them right over to us, you're pretty much good to go. This is one of our scorecards, and right here on the scorecard over on this side, under those categories, you can see some of the categories that we have for awarding these projects, how we score projects higher or lower, like neighborhood diversity, occupancy, qualifications, sustainment of affordable housing is on there, engagement with the PHA. All of that goes into the way that we score these projects. This is our actual first scorecard of the projects that we awarded. And you guys can tell it's lit up like a Christmas tree, and those colors represent different things about the projects, but essentially this is a great way to say it. Kind of show that administrative change. There's a lot going on with these projects, so being able to balance them out and award them successfully, it's a process, but it's definitely worthwhile. This is one of the letters of intent that we would send out once we have made a decision. Our board approves the selected nominees, the selected awardees. We send these out to each one. It talks about how many units you were awarded, where the building is, all that good stuff. For this particular project, you can see our total allocation of units in this building, 41 units. This was a senior project in which we were able to project base the whole thing. This is another unit in which we were able to protect the seniors who live there for a LIHTC deal that might be expires very soon. This is a housing assistance payment contract. This is the document that governs the whole thing, the relationships, and how this project works. This is an AHAP, an agreement into entering into a housing assistance payment contract because we like to treat on it. But this is for new construction developments. They may not be placed in service just yet. They're still being built. This is the way that we commit to supplying that assistance after the fact. This is a checklist that we received from our field office at HUD to kind of govern the way we went through these processes. What I'm showing here is essentially, it is very hard to mess this up if you're a public housing agency trying to put this into effect, because they give you a checklist step by step on how to do it, how to get this started, and how to implement it. It's kind of bureaucratic and stuffy, but it still works, still pretty effective. And obviously, a new public housing agency that's just starting this program, they're going to probably make mistakes and step on their own feet once or twice. I know I did. And HUD was extremely patient with me along the way. We're still learning something new about these processes and programs every day. So, project-based vouchers, just have fun with it. It's the GOAT. Had to throw that in there. This is one of our project-based voucher assistance units. The critters that you see on the screen, these units are set aside for individuals experiencing mental health needs and crises. These are therapy goats.
So what's governance thinking?
Right next to the actual housing development, right? So it's fantastic to have this. This guy right here, this goat in the front, the center, he looks like a goat, but he's really an attention hog. His name is Emery. In the background, he's a little bit hard to see, but there's a red Highland mini cow with curly hair. His name is Freddie Mercury, and he's kind of a jerk, but he's like that. A lot of fun to hang out with. This is on site at one of our projects. This is one of the projects that would have shut down without the intercession of project-based voucher assistance. So all of the people that live here, who knows what would happen to them? I don't know. I can't testify to that. But we're able to step in, keep these projects afloat, feasible, and have fun with animals in the process. It's great as a public housing agency for us to identify, find projects like this, and put a bit of ourselves into the awards. To put a bit of ourselves and what we value into these projects. We wanted projects with services. We wanted projects like this with things on site for the tenants to ensure that they will live there for a very long time and they will be happy. It was a fantastic project.